Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Brian Devine. I'm the math guy at Hamilton Education. And in this session, we're going to be going through the math sections of the digital SAT coded number 302. So let's get into it. Question one. Section one, question one, we're given a histograph or a histogram. It's a bar graph. And a bar graph, we often refer to it as a bucket graph because each of the stacks is holding a quantity for a certain quality. Here, the quality is years and the quantity is profit in thousands. The graph above shows the annual profit posted by a company over the years 2011 to 2019. In which year did the company post the greatest profit? Well, the greatest profit is going to be where the biggest bucket is. And so if we just identify which year had the biggest bucket, we've got the largest profit. And that's easy to see on a histogram because it's the tallest stack. And that would be the year 2016. So C is the correct answer. Question two. A bottle manufacturer observed that 19 of every 500 bottles that they produce do not meet quality standards for the clientele. If a bottle was randomly selected from the production line, what is the percent probability that the bottle did not meet the quality standards? Well, if we look at 19 out of 500, we want to know how much is that because it's a percent and percent means out of 100. So this is something out of 100. So we can just say something out of 100. I can stick that into a calculator. 1900 divided by 500 would give me what it is. Or I could just look at, well, I divided that by 5 in order to get 100. So if I take 19 and divide it by 5, I should then get question mark. And 19 divided by 5 is 3.8. So 3.8%. So C is the answer. Question three. In question three, we're given a figure, geometric figure. It looks like we got a bunch of lines cross it. In the figure above, I have that line L is parallel to line M. And if that's true, then I should be able to answer this question using facts about parallel lines cut by transversals. So what is the value of X plus Y? Well, if I consider that line N is cutting across parallel lines L and M, then if this angle is Y, then this angle here must also be Y by the idea of alternating interior. And if that's so, well, these two have to add to 180, and so Y must be equal to 180 minus 48. Which is 132. And X is in a relationship with this angle 66 right here. And line P cuts across parallel lines L and M, and 66 and X are on the same side of the transversal. So those two have to add up to 180 because of the fact that consecutive interior angles formed by a transversal across parallel lines are supplementary. So I know that X has to equal 180 minus 66, which is 114. And so if I add this and I add this, I'm going to get X plus Y is equal to 246 degrees. But I have to put it in radians. So I'm going to take 246 times the conversion pi over 180. And if I clean that up, I get 41 pi over 30, which is D. So D is the correct answer. Question 4. In the graph of the exponential function y equals 3 times b to the x is graphed. That's kind of redundant. If b is a positive integer, well, we can see that it's a growth model then. What is the x-intercept of the function? Well, if b is a positive integer, and I take b to a negative power, that's like 1 over b. It's like b to the negative fifth would be 1 over b to the fifth. And so this is going to continue to get smaller and smaller, but it's never going to be 0. It's always going to be positive. So it's never going to cross the x-axis, which means that there'll never be an x-intercept. So D is the correct answer. Question 5. In question 5, the diagonal length of a certain square is 12. What is the perimeter of the square? Well, let's look at a square. And let's make the diagonal length 12. Now, if I just look at the half of the square below that hypotenuse now, if that's 12, then this side has to be 6 root 2, and this side 6 root 2, because they're congruent sides. It's a square. And by the Pythagorean theorem, if I take x squared plus x squared equals 12 squared, and I solve that, I'm going to get x is 6 root 2 by the Pythagorean theorem. Well, then the perimeter of this would be 4 times that. And 4 times 6 root 2 is 24 root 2. So C is the correct answer. Question number 6. To finance the direct purchase of a new e-bike, the manufacturer offers a payment plan where the total amount paid is calculated from the equation T of P equals 24P plus 400, where P is the amount paid monthly and T is the total paid. So you must put 400 down to start, is what that means when P is 0. So what is the total cost when the monthly payment plan is 120? So they said that then P equals 120. So T of 120 should be 24 times 120 plus 400. And you get a calculator, or you can use the Desmos app that comes with the test. But on this one, you'd use your calculator. But if I stick that in there, I get 3280. So C is the correct answer. And if you're going to spend that much for an e-bike, it better be a good one. Question number 7. What is the sum of all solutions to the equation given above? Well, my first inclination when I see a proportion like this, a ratio equaling some ratio, is to cross multiply. So I'm going to end up with r squared minus r equals 56, which I can write as r squared minus r minus 56 equals 0, which I can factor into r minus 8, r plus 7 equals 0, which tells me that r has to be 8 or r has to be negative 7, which means that 8 and negative 7, would be the zeros of this particular equation. So if I add these together, well, I should get 1. And 1 is the answer, C. So that was the long way. Let me show you the short way. What I could have realized is that as soon as I got it into ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 form, then the sum of the roots is going to be negative b over a. Well, negative b over a. B equals -1 and a equals 1 here. And so that would be -1 over 1, which equals 1. And again, C is still your answer. So hard way, easy way, whichever way you did it. I mean, you could have graphed this thing and seen where the zeros are. That would have been another alternative way to utilize that calculating app that comes with every digital SAT test that you would be taking. Question 8. In question 8, an ant is at the point 2, 7 on a piece of graph paper. And he travels in a straight line to the point -8, 31. And he reaches that point after 10 seconds. How much distance did the ant travel during that 10 seconds? Well, I got 2 points. I could graph them and see. I mean, that's not too hard to do. I got to be, relatively accurate. But if I'm at 2, 7, I'm up here. And then if I'm at -8, and we'll say this is -31, I'm down here. And so I would have gone that distance. Now I can look at the fact that horizontal and vertical distance are going to form sides of a right triangle. So I can utilize the distance formula. The hypotenuse has got to be the square root of the square of that length plus the square of that length. Well, distance then is going to be the square root of the change in x, which is going to be 2 plus 8, 2 minus -8 squared, plus the relative change in y, which is going to be 7 minus 31 squared. And if I stick that in a calculator, well, I'm going to end up with 10 squared plus 24 squared. And I can see that that's going to be the square root of 26 squared. And so that's going to be 26. Now, I knew that if this was 10 and this is 24, this has to be 26 because it's a 5, 12, 13 ratio, which is the same as 10, 24, 26. So you could have gone about that way. But either way, the distance is 26. Question 9. In question 9, we're given 2 sets. Set A has got so many elements in it. It looks like there's 8 of them. Set B has got so many elements in it. Looks like there's 12 of them. And as I look at them, I notice that, hey, set B really is set A, but I added in 1. I added in 5, I added in 8, and I added in 12. Other than that, they're the same set. If I take out those 4 numbers I just mentioned, set B and set A are identical. Put them back in, they're not. But anyway, which of the following statements regarding the 2 data sets must be true? So the mean of A is greater than the mean of B. The mean of A is equal. The mean of A is less than. There's not enough data. Well, we can calculate the mean. If I look at this one, I'm going to have 13 plus 13 plus 13 plus 13 divided by 8. And so the mean of A is going to be 52 divided by 8, which is 13 halves. And if I look at set B, I've got 13 plus 13 plus 13 plus 13 plus 13 plus 13. And that's divided by 12. So the mean of B equals 13 halves. They're the same. So the mean of A equals the mean of B. So B is the correct answer. Problem 10. A certain class of submarine has ballast tanks that hold 62,770 gallons of seawater when the sub is fully submerged. To surface from a normal operating depth, compressed air is forced into the tanks, displacing the water and thus increasing buoyancy, allowing the sub to rise to the surface. if there are 37,662 gallons of seawater left in the tanks 18 seconds after the submarine begins ascending from a normal operating depth, what is the average volume of seawater in gallons removed from the ballast tanks each second of the ascent? Well, they only give us a little bit of information, and the phrase the average volume of seawater, well, that depends on the fact that we've only been given 2 points in time and the volume at those 2 points in time. They told us that at time zero, there was 62,770 gallons in the tank. And then they told us at time 18 seconds later, there was 37,662 gallons in the tank. And the average volume of seawater must be the linear slope between those 2 points. So I find that rate of change. So I have 37,662 minus 62,770, and that's going to be over respectively 18 minus 0. And if I go into a calculator, I find that's going to be negative 1,394.8 repeating, which I can round to the nearest integer. So the slope then between these 2 points is about negative 1,395. And it's negative because I'm removing water. I'm removing water from the tank. And so the volume of water that was removed is going to be 1,395. And cut. That should be it. And I hope your holiday was good. I hope the start of your summer's even better. And I think David's got another recording coming to you of the test that he wrote, the 303. All right, man. See you later. Well, we've been through that. Question 11. If 3m plus 6 equals 17, what is the value of 9m plus 16? Well, when I see something like this, and I know that, well, if I multiply 3m by 3, I get 9m. So I'm going to take the whole thing and multiply the whole darn equation by 3 and see what happens. So that's going to be 9m plus 18 equals 51. And if I just take 2 away from this, I get 9m plus 16. So I'll take 2 away from that, and I get 49. And I note that that's one of the answers. And I choose that one, and I get another point because it's right. And note that C rhymes with C, which is yes in Spanish and Italian. I think Esperanto too. It should be. Next question. Question 12. A baseball is thrown up and away from the top of a building. The height of the ball in meters can be accurately modeled by this equation, which you've probably seen this type of equation a bunch of times in class, where h is the height of the ball at time t. Which of the following numbers or combination of numbers in the equation represents the height of the building from which the ball is thrown? Well, that would have to be when t equals 0. And if I stick 0 into this equation, h of 0 equals 122. So we threw it from a building that was 122 meters high. D is your answer. And D also rhymes with C, but it's not C. It's D. Here. Oh, coffee. Need coffee. All that translating between English and Esperanto kind of stuck in my throat. Come back to question 13. Question 13. Again, we're given a quadratic. In fact, it looks similar to the one in 12. And to the nearest 100th, it asks, for what value of x does the equation g of x shown above achieve a maximum? Well, this is a quadratic, and I can see that the leading coefficient is negative, so it's going to open down, which means it will have a maximum value. And we know this, that when we get a quadratic that's in the form ax squared plus bx plus c, that the maximum is going to be when x equals negative b over 2a. And so if we look at g of x, well, g of x, we can write in that form, negative 4.9x squared plus 52x plus 122. So the max should be when x equals negative 52 over 2 times negative 4.9, which would be negative 9.8. And I can put that into a calculator and I get 5.306. I got to round it to the nearest 100, so 5.31. Question 14. At Ernesto Berto's taco stand, the cost for a breakfast burrito and a juice drink is 610 cents, $6.10. And the cost for 3 breakfast burritos and 4 juice drinks is 1,930 cents, $19.30 before tax. And Janet and Ronit have $31 between them. But they have to add a 5% sales tax to their total. And we want to know what's the greatest number of breakfast burritos that they can buy. Well, I do know that if I let B equal the number of breakfast burritos, and J equal the number of juices, then I do know this, that 3B plus 4J is going to be 19.3. And B plus J is going to equal 6.1. So this is a system of equations. Now, I can solve that thing by graphing it. Let B be X and J be Y. I could use substitution, or I could use elimination. Whatever I do, I can find the answer there. And what I'm going to find is that a burrito is going to cost $5.10. And a juice drink is going to cost $1. However you solve it. I recommend graphing it. You've got that right there. But you could use elimination to find out how much is one versus the other. Well, once you find that, what you got to focus on the price for burritos. And I know that if I take the price of burritos times the number of burritos, and then I add in that 5% tax, that's got to be less than or equal to 31. And so if I take 31 then and divide it by 1.05 times 510, Well, let's do that on a calculator right now. 31 divided by 1.05 times 5.1. And I get that B has to be less than or equal to 5.79. And since I cannot have partial burritos, B's got to be equal to 5. So B is your correct answer. 15. In 15, the graph of the linear equation g of x goes through this point, 1, -7, and this point, -3, 5. And I want to know which of the following equations models this line. Well, they're all linear, so maybe I should focus on the slope. So the slope of g has to be 5 minus -7, so 5 plus 7, over -3 minus 1, so -3 minus 1, which is going to be 12 over -4, so this will be -3. And using just one of those points, I'll use -3, 5. Then g of x by the point slope formula has to be the slope times x minus the x value, minus -3 would be +3, plus the y value of the point given. And so g of x would have to be -3x minus 9 plus 5 would be -4. So if I have that y equals -3x minus 4, then 3x plus y plus 4 must equal 0 if I add 3x and 4 to both sides. So A is the answer. And you get a point. Question 16. In question 16, the formula S equals 1/4 S squared root 3 calculates the area of any equilateral triangle with side S. Which of the following statements must be true regarding the altitude of any equilateral triangle? Well, the fact is that every angle interior is 60 degrees. 180 divided by 3, they're all congruent. And if I drop this altitude, the height, that's going to bisect the base, and it's going to bisect the vertex angle. So that's now 30 in this triangle on the right. Well, that's a 30, 60, 90 right triangle. So this then is 1/2 of S. And this is S root 3 over 2 by the 30, 60, 90 right triangle thing. And so the altitude of the equilateral triangle must be half the side length times root 3, which is B. And so B is the correct answer. Now, I also could have said this, that the area of a triangle is going to be 1/2 the base times the height. So 1/4 of S squared root 3 has to be 1/2 S times the height. And if I take factor 1/2 S from both sides, I get 1/2 S root 3 must be the height, which is exactly what B says as well. And so S root 3 over 2, 1/2 S root 3, B is still your answer. Question 17. In question 17, the circle shown has a radius of 48 pi. And two of the sectors formed are congruent, 70 and 70. And this one obviously is 90 degrees. It's got the right angle thing in it. And if I look at that, this is 230 degrees. So this must be, that's supposed to be 230. This must be 130 degrees because the sum of all um, central angles in a circle would be 360 degrees in a circle. And I want to approximate the length of the arc cut by the angle measured x. So if x equals 130, then that fraction of the circle would be 130 over 360. It'd be the same as the central angle to the entire circle. And if I take that and multiply it by the circumference, which would be 2 pi times the radius, I can stick that into a calculator and I get 342.15-ish. So 342 would be the correct answer, and C is the correct choice. Question 18. Runyon's Grunion Runners provides Grunion hunting experience for both tourists and locals on the 2 nights, blah, 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 blah. Excursions are limited to 24 people per group, and adults pay 30 and children pay 15, half of the adult price. On the 3rd night of the 2nd Grunion run, Runyon's had a revenue of 480 for a full group, both children and adults. How many children were in the group? Well, I know if I let A be the number of adults, 30A would be the revenue from the adults in the group. And if I let C be the number of children, 15C would be the revenue from the children in that group. And all that equaled the total amount of money, which was 480. And I know that the number of adults plus the number of children had to be the number in the group, which was 24. And again, I have a system of equations. Now, I can take negative 30 times the second equation, eliminate A, and that'll allow me to find C. Or I could graph both of these on the Desmos calculator or on my calculator. I could let A be X and C be Y, and I can find the point where they cross and find what the Y value of that is. Or I could substitute. I could say that A equals 24 minus C, plug that into the first equation, and solve that. But either way I do it, I'm going to find that there were 8 adults and that there were 16 children. And so 16 children would be your answer. Number 19. The function defined as L of t equals 6t minus 24 when it's graphed in a coordinate plane, it intersects the vertical y-axis at 0x, and it goes through the horizontal x-axis at y0. And I want to know what's the sum then of those values. Well, be careful because you're being goofed with, and they're calling the y-intercept x and the x-intercept y. So try not to mix that up. It's easy to do. You're so used to that. But I know that when t equals 0, x equals negative 24. And I know then when L of t equals 0, y would equal 4. And so if I add these two together, I get negative 20. And B is the correct answer. Question 20. Given that the linear expression x plus a is a factor of the polynomial 12x to the fourth plus 102x cubed plus 48x squared, and a is positive, what is the greatest possible value for a? Well, you could graph it again. You could graph that. Find the zeros. See where it crosses the x-axis. And then take the one that answers the question. And I know if I do graph that, I'm going to find that this thing will have zeros when x equals negative 8 when x equals -1/2, and when x equals 0. And so I should have then that x plus 8 is a factor, and 2x plus 1 is a factor, and it looks like x squared is a factor. Well, right here answers the question. My answer should be 8. Or I could do this. I could, factor that thing out and see what plays. And so I do factor it out. I get 6x squared. I get 2x plus 1. And I get x plus 8. So I went ahead and factored that thing. And I can see again that this fulfills the biggest A that would be in the form x plus A. So D is your answer. Now, I know what a lot of people did is they graphed it and picked the one that was furthest right. But we had to fit this form of x plus A. And we usually write factors as x minus the 0 value that we see from the graph. And x minus -8 is x plus 8. Question 21. Question 21, the two equations form a nonlinear system. And n is some positive real value. And the system has a single solution. And we want to know what's the value of n. Well, I could, maybe graph this with a slider and see when it crosses that line. I could do it that way. But algebraically, it would be just as easy to do with this, where I'm going to say that x squared minus 16x plus n has to equal -13/2, which means that x squared minus 16x plus n plus 13/2 has to equal 0. Now, to be a single solution, this thing must be a perfect square binomial. It must be of the form x minus a squared equals 0. Well, I can use the idea of completing the square. If I look at half of the b number, -16, and I square it, I get 64, the number that should be on the n. So I have the idea that n plus 13/2 must equal 64 for this to be a perfect square binomial. Or pardon me, a binomial square that becomes a perfect square trinomial. Now, that's not too hard to do. So n has to be 64 minus 6.5, which equals 57.5, which is, thank the Lord, or whatever deities you worship, is one of the answers. And C, it rhymes with yes in Spanish, Italian, and Esperanto, is the answer. Question 22, last one on this module. The lengths of the sides of triangle XYZ are given, and triangle ABC is similar to XYZ. So they said XYZ is similar to ABC, which means angle X and angle A are congruent, angle Y, angle B are congruent, angle Z, angle C are congruent, XY is the same length as AB, and YZ is the same length as BC, and XZ is the same as AC. So the only difference is the ratio of the sides, but they're in the same ratio. Now, know something about triangle XYZ. 16 squared plus 30 squared is 34 squared. In fact, this is what's called an 8, 15, 17 right triangle. So this is a right angle at X, which means this is a right angle at B, which means that the cosine of Y and thus the cosine of B would equal 0 because the cosine of 90 degrees or pi over 2 equals 0. And we want to know what is then 1 over cosine B. Well, that's going to be undefined because 1 over 0 is undefined. So D is the correct answer. Tricky. Section 2, or module 2, pardon me, question 1. A sample of integrated math students at Crescent Canyon Academy, blah, blah, blah. How many students will be taking AP Stats or AP Calc next semester? Of the 84 that participated in the poll, 31% intended to take stats, and the rest said that they were going to take calculus. Well, 100 minus 31 is 69% then said they're going to take calculus. And if there are twice as many IM3 students as were recorded in the poll, well, that's going to be 168. And we look then at 69% of them, that should be the number that are taking the calculus. So that is 115.92, which we can round to 116 because that 0.92 of a person might not pass. We're going to fill them up. And C is the correct answer. Question 2. Ray walks at an average speed of 4.8 kilometers per hour, and he jogs at an average speed of 8.4 kilometers per hour. And he went a total of 30 kilometers by jogging for W minutes and walking for J minutes. Which of the following equations can be used to determine how many hours Ray walked and ran this week? Well, I'm going to do it over here on the side because I got more space. But if we look at his jog, well, the jog is going to be 8.4 kilometers in 1 hour. But they gave us the time in minutes. So I know that 1 hour is going to be 60 minutes. And so the jog rate should be 0.14 kilometers per minute when I take 8.4 and divide it by 60. And if I look at his walk, then I'm going to have 4.8 kilometers per hour. And I'm going to convert that into minutes. So 1 hour would be 60 minutes. The hours are going to cancel like they did up here. And I'm going to be in kilometers per minute like I was up there. And walking then, his rate is 0.08 kilometers per minute. And so if I take his rate walking times the number of minutes, so 0.08 times J minutes walking plus 0.14 times W minutes jogging, that should then give me 30 kilometers. And A would be my answer. Question 3. In question 3, we're given a scatter plot that has a line of best fit on it. And the graph shows the relationship between internet users' age on the horizontal axis and the number of emails they send per day on the vertical axis. And A would be the age, so this is the A axis, and E of A, well, that would be on the vertical axis. And so this is linear, and we want to know which best fits. Well, I note that the y-intercept here is around 35. And I can see the slope that I went down 25. And then as I went over 72. And so the slope is going to be negative 25 over 72, which is about negative 5 over 14. It's about that. So I have a negative slope. I've got a y-intercept around 35. So I should have something like y equals negative 5 over 14a plus 35, something like that. So we'll scroll down here and see what we got. So it's not going to be B and it's not going to be D because those have the wrong y-intercepts. And this one has a positive slope, so it's not that one. The answer is A. And it just coincides with what we just came up with. Question 4 on section module 2. The rational function graphed above is undefined at A. Well, it's undefined right here. So A's got to be negative 1. And it has a root at B. Well, a root is where it crosses the x-axis. So B equals 1. And as x becomes more positive or negative, i.e. as x goes to positive or negative infinity, the value of the function approaches the horizontal asymptote, which would be c equals 1/2. And so I had to find a times b divided by c. So a times b divided by c is going to be negative 2. So A is the answer. Question 5. Let me zoom in on that just a little bit. In question 5, if R, S, and T are positive rational values, which of the expressions below is equivalent to the expression above? Well, it looks like product rule for exponents. So I'm going to look at just the R's first, and I'm going to then gather the exponents together in a sum because a product of exponential terms of the same base becomes a sum of exponents in effect. So I'm going to have R to the 3 minus 2 minus 3 times then S to the negative 1 plus 2 minus 2 times T to the 4 minus 3 plus 2. So that's going to be R to the negative 2 times S to the negative 1 times T to the 3. And if I rewrite that, I should have T cubed over R squared S, which is right here, C. Question 6. What is the median of data set A shown? Well, to find the median, I have to arrange them from low to high. So I'm going to put it from the lowest one up to the highest one. So 5, then 7, then 15, then 17, then 19, 22, then 25, 27, 31, 35. Oh, 30, 31, 35. That all of them? That's all of them. And so if I look at that, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And so I should have the one that's in the middle. So if I go in 6 this way, or I go in 6 this way, I find that 22 is the median. Question 7. Question 7, I want to know what's the solution to this given equation? Well, I'm going to add 95 to both sides. So m, when I add 95 to that side, the negative 95 becomes 0, has got to be 40 plus 95, which is 135. So 135. Short, sweet, quick, simple, easy point. Question 8. What is the positive difference between the x-intercepts of the given equation? Well, remember, an x-intercept is going to be when y equals 0. And here, if y equals 0, x is 0. And over here, if y equals 0, then we're going to intercept at 4, 0. And so I wanted to know what's 4 minus 0 equal to? Well, it was 4 yesterday and the day before. I'm assuming it's going to be 4 today and tomorrow, but I'm going to gamble and I'm going to say 4. Question 9. We're given an equation, h of t equals negative 6t plus 108. And we're told that this function models the horizontal distance remaining in meters for a skateboard traveling along a path for t seconds. According to the given model, how many seconds will it take for the skateboard to complete the path? Well, that's got to be when h of t equals 0. So 0 equals negative 6t plus 108. That's when it's done. So 108 would have to equal 6t if that's true, and t would have to equal 108 over 6, which is going to be 18, which is the answer C. Question 10. We're given an equation P over NR equals T over V, a literal equation it's called because it's all letters, mostly all letters here. Yeah, sometimes it could have numbers, but usually they want us to solve for one of the things there. Let's check. Which of the following equations correctly expresses the variation constant of this relationship in terms of all of the other stuff? And R is the variation constant. So I'm going to solve for R. Watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to flip them over right away. Because it's an equation, I can rewrite NR over P as equal to V over T. I can just flip over both sides. If it had been an inequality, I would end up flipping the sign over if I had reciprocated both sides. But here, flip, same relationship. So multiply both sides by P. I got VP has got to equal, NR equals VP over T. Divide away the N. So R has to be, well, they wrote it this way, PV, and that would be over NT. So R equals PV over NT. Then D must be the answer, and I got hiccups. But D's still the answer, despite my hiccups. Question 11. In question 11, we're given two equations, and when the nonlinear system, so these will either cross or not cross, we'll see what happens. When the nonlinear system of equations given above are graphed, well, that's a good way to solve it. On the xy coordinate plane, the point JK, or the xy point where they intersect, what's the value of J? So I could graph that thing and see that it's going to intersect at negative 4, 23, and it'll intersect at 1, 8 when I use the grapher on the Desmos or my own graphing calculator. And I can see that one of those would be the answer. So I'm thinking the answer is probably -4. But we can verify it by saying, well, they both intersect where the y's are the same. So x squared plus 7 would have to equal -3x plus 11, which means that x squared plus 3x minus 4 would have to equal 0, which we could factor as x plus 4, x minus 1 would equal 0. And this shows us that x could be -4 or x could be 1. Or better yet, j could be -4 in this case. And B is your answer. I know that these confuse people, pardon me. I know that these confuse people. I recommend highly use your grapher. I would immediately go to the Desmos grapher and graph these things because you can graph inequalities. It does it very nicely. It shows you exactly what you need to know. But if you did graph these things, what you're going to see is that we're going to have a vertical line at 14, and then we're going to have well, there'll be dash lines, but we'll have another dash line that'll come down with a negative slope. It'll have a slope of -1/4. And the point where they intersect is really what you want. I mean, you want to know the y value of all the solutions, which would be down in this space where underneath this line coincides with the right or greater than that line. Ugly. So that being the case, you're going to find that y must be less than -8. But you can also look at it this way. From the graph. What if x was 14? Then we can say then that, well, 14 plus 4y has to be less than -18. Which would mean that 4y has to be less than -32, which means that y has to be less than -8. And again, you can algebraically prove that answer. But if you've got access to that grapher and you want to get it done quickly and correctly, it's to your advantage to be able to utilize that. I figure if you know how to enter it, you know how to understand the answer, hopefully, at least. Yeah. We'll talk to you later on that one. Question 13. Out of the 859 Hamilton education students that took the SAT in 23, just over 72% scored 740 or higher when they took the official SAT. How many of these students scored 740 or higher? So I'm going to take 72% times 859, and I'm going to get 618.48. And I'm going to work on the fact that it was just over 72%. So I'm going to round up to 619. So B would be the correct answer. And it is. All right. I apologize for that. And talking to David, the just over was added in order to make it a little trickier. Just plug that one in where the 13 is. And I will be also providing another addendum tape here for, the last one here, second to last one. I just talked to David about that, and he's reprinting this so it's P of T instead of P of X, so it'll be consistent, and it won't look so like Trump staffer-like, you know what I'm saying? Fourth Reich. Anyway, I apologize if you're a MAGA guy. I don't want to insult you. You're the last guy that I want to insult, tell you the truth, because you make me look pretty. All right, we'll talk to you later. There will be another one following this for this particular test. 14. Given the function h of x above, then for what value of x does h of x equal 4? Well, for this thing to equal 4, we'd have to have 2 to the x minus 1 equal 1. And for that to be true, then the exponent must have been a 0. So x would have to be 1. And B is the correct answer. Question 15. Which of the following is an equivalent form of the expression, oh, big, ugly fraction looking thing? We probably had to factor something. And if I look at the top, I've got x minus 5 as a factor in each of the terms in that sum. So I can undistribute that. I can use the distributive property in reverse and rewrite the top as 4x plus 20 times x minus 5. And the bottom I can factor because it's a difference of two squares as x plus 5 times x minus 5. And then I know, well, hey, I can pull a 4 out of that one thing on the top. The 4x plus 20 I can rewrite as 4 times x plus 5, and then that's times x minus 5. And that's over x plus 5 times x minus 5. Now, these will factor as ones. I mean, we can't have x equal to plus or minus 5, but equivalently, it'll just look like 4, a flat line at 4 when we graph it. So C is your correct answer for number 15. Question 16. Line P is parallel to line Q and perpendicular to R. So P is parallel to Q. It's perpendicular to R when you graph all three of them. And line R can be written as this, which we could write as y equals negative 2/3 x plus 4. Because I can subtract 2x from both sides, divide everything by 3. And so I see the slope of R is negative 2/3, which tells me right away that the slope of both P and Q must be the opposite reciprocal of that, which would be 3/2. So D is the correct answer. Question 17. The function shown above, v equals 22,435 times 0.97 to the t, models the decay rate of the volume of granite at the base of a waterfall. The model was based on data taken over 20 years, and it goes from 0 to 20, obviously. So from 2003 to 2023, pardon me. If the function is graphed in the VT plane, which of the statements below must be true regarding the t-intercept of the function? Well, we had a question like this earlier on where we had an exponential function that was increasing. Well, think of one that's decreasing. Is that, in effect, we're going to be at that 22,000, and then it's going to eventually flatten out towards 0, but it's still going to be positive because this is positive. So we're never going to cross the x-axis because this common ratio is positive. It'll always be a positive number, no matter how big t gets. Well, if that's the case, then we should have the graph of the equation will never intersect with the horizontal axis. And so D would be the correct solution here. Question 18. Triangles XYZ and ABC are similar. They're not shown, but we could draw them. I mean, here's AB, and here's X, Y, Z. There's two similar triangles. All their angles would be the same measure, respectively. X and A correspond, B with Y, and they give us that Z and C are the same measure. If the ratio of similarity K between the two triangles is given as 3, and the measure of angle A is 47, then the measure of angle X, well, in similar triangles, the angles are congruent. It's the sides that are in the different proportions. And so it should be the same measure then, because they're congruent angles due to similarity. Angle A is congruent to angle X. In question 19, we're given the graph of a line, y equals h of 2x minus 7. And we want to know which of the functions, or pardon me, which of the following equations defines h of x. Well, we can see something right here, that h of x, for us to have h of 2x minus 7, to have a y-intercept at -4, then h of x must have a y-intercept of 3. So it's not going to be B, and it's not going to be C. And we can see that the slope of h of 2x is 4/3. We can see that we went up 4 and we went over 3. And so we should have then that, well, we multiplied something by 2 to get the 4/3. The slope of h of x then should be half of that. So we should have a slope of 2/3 and a y-intercept at 3, which means that it's not D. It's got to be A. Question 20. A manufacturer claims that 1 gallon of their garden fertilizer mix will cover a surface of 100 square feet. Hold on, I'm going to sneeze. We're going to have to do this one again. Oh, sorry. I just sneezed all over my dog. He's okay with that. He likes it. All right. Take 2. Question 20. A manufacturer claims that 1 gallon of their premium garden fertilizer mix will cover a surface area of 100 square feet of soil. Elijah wants to fertilize his entire garden, and it has a surface area of g square feet. And he wants to do this 4 times over the whole growing season. Which of the expressions below provides the total number of gallons that Elijah is going to need to accomplish his garden fertilizing goals over the entire season? Well, if it takes 1 gallon to do 100 square feet, and he's got g square feet, and he's going to do this 4 times, well, there's our setup right there, because we'll lose the square feet here, and we're going to end up with gallons, which would give us exactly what we're thinking of. So, or Elijah is, so 4g over 100 would be the same as g over 25, which is right here. C. Question 21. For the function p, the value of p of t increases by 137% whenever the non-negative value of t goes up by 1. Now, that is a $100 way of saying a 50-cent phrase that this is an exponential function. Everything below indicates that in all the answers. But when we have an increase of 137%, remember we're changing the 137% to a decimal. So that's going to be 1.37. But our increase is we're adding that to 1 because we're using the idea that P of t is going to be some initial value. I'll just call it x times 1 plus some rate to time. Okay, cool. So this is 2.37, which is going to be our base number, which points right away to C, that we're going to have an initial value, which is our x, 1023, and that's going to go up by 137%, so 1 plus 1.37, the rate, to time. So C is the answer. Question 22. In question 22, we're given that g of x equals x plus 4, x plus 5, x minus 6 in a product polynomial. And the function g of x is given above. Which of the following tables provides values for the function f of x defined as f of x equals negative 2 g of x plus 4? Well, note here that if x is negative 4, then g of x equals 0. And if x is negative 5, g of x equals 0. And if x is 6, g of x equals 0. And all of the inputs they gave you here, they gave you in each of these were negative 5, negative 4, and 6. So for the values they gave me, well, f of negative 5 is going to be 0 plus 4. And f of negative 4 is going to be 0 plus 4. And f of 6 would also be 0 plus 4, because g of negative 5 and g of negative 4 and g of 6 are 0, respectively. And so C is our only choice that makes sense. And you've made it through another SAT test.